Oh, Olin really affected my way of thinking. He wanted to scare me and he succeeded. I have to try to control myself a little. This sentence on the tape was printed with the sound of a click. The recording was over. He closed his eyes and took 4 deep breaths. He held every breath for 5 seconds before exhaling. Nothing like this has ever happened to him before in the house, unless it was supposed to be a residential area. Not even in the cemeteries and castles that are said to be residential. The feeling now was not that he was in a residential place, but as if he were under the influence of cheap drugs. Olin is the reason. Your sleep is magnetically. But you will wake up and spend the whole night in this damn room. This is the best place I've ever visited to write about him. Get Olin out of the subject, and you'll have a piece to write ghost stories for 10 years. Olin can't win. He and his friends are not among the 30 people who died here. The whole thing is in my hands now. Breathe, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It was dressed like a traditional one, with a lining on the shoulder and a curtain. In the picture, there were also cars of old models walking in the street in front of the hotel. The cabriolet and the vacuum cleaner seems to have been around since 1955. And what is this cabriolet? He put it in his pocket, with his shirt and his tree. I will keep it as a souvenir. And now, it is time for the clean air. On the tape, there is a noise when he puts the tape on the desk. Usually, the desk of the office. Then there is a moment of silence. Then there are far-off voices of a person trying and putting in a lot of effort in a difficult job. Then there is a moment of silence again. Then there's a faint voice and Mike says, "I did it." This was a bit far from Mike, but he gets closer to Mike. He lifts him from the desk and he speaks. "I did it." The lower part of the window was not ready to respond. It was as if it was choked with nails. But the upper part was not a problem. Now I can hear the traffic noise in the street and all the car noises. The sounds are very comfortable for me right now. There's a sound of someone playing the saxophone in the street, probably in front of the plaza, a few blocks away. It reminds me of my brother. And he stops talking. The red light in the tape was on. It was as if it was an eye looking at him with a threat. "Your brother? Your brother is dead. Mike Inslin fell in the smoke war." "What do you mean? We are all in war." "Mike Inslin always wins in every battle, but Donald Inslin. In fact, my brother had diabetes a long time ago during the harsh winter on the highway to Connecticut." He laughed and closed the tape. There are still other recordings on the tape after this sentence, but this was the last sentence he understood. The last sentence may have meaning. Mike turned around and looked at the photos again. They were still attached correctly. Nice photos, but this silent nature was an ugly drawing in an annoying way. He pressed the record button and said 2 words, and that's it. Portuguese smoke. He closed the tape. He walked through the room towards the bedroom door. He stood for a moment in front of the picture of the woman hanging by the door. Then he reached out his hand in the dark of the room, looking for the light button. A moment's impression was in his mind at the time, a strange feeling as if he were skin, old, dead skin. There was something wrong with what he touched, the wall under his hand. But he found the light button, and the yellow light immersed the bedroom from another cloud in the ceiling. A large double-decker bed covered with yellow-orange tiles. "Why are you hiding?" He turned off the recorder and stopped the tape. He entered the room. He was amazed at the colors of the desert bed covers and the wrinkles of the pillows under the pillow. "Should I sleep here?" No, thanks. It's as if I'm going to sleep inside this annoying silent nature." He pressed the record button again and said, "Orpheus on the Orpheum Circuit." He turned off the tape and walked to the bed. The bed was covered in yellow-orange. It was probably bright during the day, but now the colors of the bed reflected. There was a small bedside table on each side of the bed, a large black phone with a chain on it. The phone's chain opened as if it were wide, amazing eyes. On the other side of the table, there was a small plate with a plum blossom on it. Mike pressed the record button. "This is not a real plum blossom. This is definitely plastic." He stopped the tape again. On the bed itself, there was the hotel's menu. Mike approached it, trying to make sure he didn't touch anything on the bed, and he held the menu. But his nails touched the bed, and Mike's voice was annoying. The touch was soft, in a terrible way, in a wrong way. But he picked up the menu and looked at it. It was written in French, and Mike doesn't know French. 1,000 types of breakfast were birds fried in jars. At least that's something I believe French people eat. He thought about it and he smiled. When he opened his eyes again, the menu was in Russian. He opened his eyes again. It was written in Italian. He opened his eyes again. There was no menu at all. There was a picture drawn on the board, a boy looking at it with horror, and a wolf licking the boy's feet to the bone. And the wolf behind him looked like a dog enjoying his favorite game. I don't see that. The idea was in Mike's head, and of course he really didn't see that. Without closing his eyes this time, he saw in his hand a menu written in English, clearly in Russian. Each line had a type of egg, waffles, fruits. There were no birds fried in jars or anything. He looked around and slowly walked out of the small space between the wall and the bed, a space that he felt as if it were a grave. His heart beat so fast that he felt a punch in his neck, a bruise on his hand and chest, a terrible pain in his eye. There was something wrong in 1408. He was told that it was like entering a room with poisonous gas, and that's exactly what Mike felt, as if someone forced him to inhale a mixture of drugs and insects. I'm sure that's why he did that. He's laughing now at his security colleagues watching him. He must have entered the room with the poisonous gas through the ventilation openings, and it doesn't mean that Mike doesn't see that there are no ventilation openings in the room. Mike looked around in horror. There was no light on the bed or the bedside table. The table was completely empty. He turned around to the door leading to the living room and left his place. There was a picture hanging by the door. He wasn't sure that there was a picture in the room when he entered. At that moment, he wasn't sure of anything. But he was almost sure that there was no picture hanging by the door, and the picture was a silent nature, a small layer of light on an old table, and the light in the picture was yellowish-orange. I need to get out of here. He got excited and returned to the living room. He noticed the soft sound of his footsteps as if he was stepping on a hard surface. On the walls of the living room, the pictures were all tilted. The woman standing on the stairs was covered with blood. And Mike looked at her with a scary smile. Her teeth were like human flesh. The sailors disappeared from the picture. They were lined up with men and women. On the left, near the front of the ship, there was a man standing. He was wearing a brown suit and a baton in his hand. Near the front of the ship, there was a man standing, wearing a brown suit instead of a blue one, holding a baton in his hand, with a shocking expression on his face. Mike knew this man's name, Kevin O'Malley. This was his first time in the room in 1408. The sewing machines that jumped out of the window in October 1910. Everyone next to O'Malley was a victim of this room. All of them were shocked faces, as if they were all members of the same family. In the silent nature painting, there was a picture of a severed head. The same orange-yellow light reflected on the curved edges, the dried lips, the eyes that looked dead, and the cigarette behind the right ear. Mike's nose was pointing towards the door, but his legs were barely moving. It felt like his feet were sticking to the floor with every step. And of course, the door wouldn't open. The door chain wasn't locked, and the door handle was moving in the right direction, but the door wouldn't open. Mike returned to the room, breathing heavily towards the door. The window was open above the office. The curtains next to the window were moving, but he didn't feel any air, as if the room was breathing air as soon as he entered. He was still able to distinguish the sounds of the street bells, but now they were coming from far away. Was he still able to hear the sound of the saxophone coming from far away? But the room seemed to have stolen the beautiful sound, leaving a distorted sound, a low, scary sound, like the wind blowing through a dead person's neck, like the wind blowing through a glass window full of severed nails, or enough. Enough. He tried to speak, but he couldn't. His heart was beating so fast. If the heart rate was higher than that, his heart could explode. The small recorder, his loyal friend on all his exploratory trips, was no longer in his hands. He left it somewhere, but he doesn't remember where. In his bedroom. Ah, his time is gone forever now. The room must have swallowed him. He might appear again in a picture of the pictures he's hanging. He put his hand on his chest, as if he was trying to calm his heartbeats, as if he was struggling to breathe, as if he had been through a long race. When he put his hand on his chest, He felt the touch of his stiff body to the small recorder in his shirt pocket. This feeling gave him a sense of reassurance, a sense of stability. He began to notice that, unconscious, he was humming a tune, and the room was humming with him, as if there were thousands of voices hidden behind the glass wall. He felt a terrible cough, as if his stomach was swelling. He felt the air next to him heavy and dusty. But despite that, he felt he was regaining control of himself. At least enough to try and ask for help. He was still able to do that.